What if I told you that one story, your story, could spark trust, inspire change, and make you unforgettable? There's a reason stories are 22 times more memorable than facts. In this video, I'm going to break down emotional storytelling and how it's not just a nice to have, but it's your secret sauce for leadership, connection, and impact. And I'm going to show you exactly how to craft yours. Let's get into it. Emotional storytelling is a very powerful way to inspire and connect with audiences. And what's amazing about personal stories is that they can help bring your message to life in a way that facts and data can't really do in the same way. And as a leader or as a rising leader, being able to share meaningful stories is an absolutely critical skill. So today we're going to explore the art of crafting and delivering impactful emotional stories. Stories that have the power to move people, to spark imagination and motivation and action. So effective storytelling requires a few things: authenticity, vulnerability, and a focus on the human experience. And by tapping into emotions, we can create deeper, more lasting impact with our audience. Neuroscience research shows us that stories activate multiple parts of the brain, including emotional centers, making them much more memorable than just facts alone. And so what's really amazing about sharing personal stories is that they help us build trust and connection with the audience, with our interlocutors. And studies show that 68% of listeners report higher trust after hearing someone's story, not just the facts. And audiences retain information 3 times longer when it is delivered through a compelling narrative rather than just dry facts and figures. So you can see why emotional storytelling is a very powerful tool to capture attention, to convey your message, and to ensure that the key points actually stick with your audience. Let's talk about the ways and the 4 key ways that the brain responds during storytelling, and not just storytelling, but emotional narratives. So we have neural coupling, which is where the brain synchronizes when sharing stories. So brains actually synchronize when sharing stories, which creates a much deeper connection. And there you have rapport building, which is great. We also have oxytocin release. This is the trust hormone, where that's flowing during emotional narratives being told. And that too builds rapport. And then we have the prefrontal cortex activation. That's the decision-making center of the brain, which activates during storytelling. And that signals engagement. And then we have action response, which is how emotional stories can actually prompt behavioral change in the listener. So there is some action that happens on the listener's end after hearing that emotional story. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 key components of a compelling story. We have the character, right? And that is great if it's a really relatable protagonist. And it could even be the storyteller themselves. Oftentimes it is the storyteller themselves. Then we've got conflict, right? And that's important because it shows the challenge or the tension that drives the story forward. Then we've got the emotional arc, which is the journey from the initial challenge to personal or professional growth. And then we've got the resolution, which is the meaningful conclusion or insight that's gained by the end of the story. So when these elements work together, they will draw the audience in and they will create an impactful story. So when you tell your story, try to focus on bringing these four components to life by adding vivid details, sensory imagery, and authentic emotion, because this is going to help your audience connect with the narrative on a much deeper level, which is what we want. We want them to connect. Okay, so how do you craft your personal story, which sets up the theme for this lesson? Okay, the first step is to identify your moment. So this is going to require some thinking on your end, right? Think back to transformative experiences that changed your life, that changed your perspective, because this is the foundation of your personal story. Then you want to start thinking about your sensory details and imagery, because this is going to help make your story more vivid and immersive. So you want to think about describing the sights, the sounds, the smells to really transport your audience. And finally, you want to focus on emotions. So name the feelings that you experience throughout the journey, because this is what's really going to help build that connection with the audience. So the overall goal here is to craft a personal story that is three things: meaningful, relatable, and memorable. MRM, you can think of it. So when you are thinking about delivering your story, right, we really have to not just think about the content of the story, but the delivery, so that you can create a powerful delivery that resonates with your audience. You want to vary your pace, your tone, your volume throughout the presentation to help keep the audience engaged. We do not want to be monotone. That's very boring and it will easily put your audience to sleep. You want to think about using strategic pauses, which is going to help build anticipation, but also emphasize key points in your story. Think about slowing down your delivery for those emotional moments, which will help you have your message really resonate with the audience. And then you can speed up during these action-oriented sections where you're going to be able to create some energy and some sense of momentum. And of course, when you're delivering your story, you want to make eye contact with your audience, right? This is very important because it's going to help your audience connect with you on a personal level. Use open, positive, expressive body language that also matches the emotional tone of the story. And also, don't be afraid to share authentic emotions and show a vulnerable side to you, because this also helps your audience connect with you on a much deeper level. Embrace any imperfections and struggles, because your audience will actually respond better to this honesty as opposed to polished perfection, which doesn't resonate as well. Okay, so imagine somebody is telling the story where they were rejected from their dream job, which made them feel like a complete and utter failure at the time. This is the setup of the story. And then you want to mention the struggle, right? The challenge. So they might say for weeks, they really, really struggled with things like self-doubt and insecurity and questioned their purpose and their abilities. And then we have to have the turning point, right? So they can talk about how a mentor that they had asked them an important question, such as, what if this rejection is really redirecting you to something better? Okay, so that is that turning point, which the audience can also relate to. So then the person says, following that realization, they ended up doing something even more incredible for them, right? Which is maybe creating their own company, which was incredibly rewarding. So that's the resolution, right? That setback allowed this person to go out, create their own company. So you can see how a story like this illustrates how a seemingly negative experience can actually lead us down a much better path if we're open to seeing it in that way from that frame of reference. So that's a great story, right? It's emotional. It has all of the parts we talked about. And of course, as you are telling the story, you add some nonverbals, you add some, pauses and pacing, you add some sensory details and things like that, because that's also going to help you get your audience to be on the same page as you. Okay. So when you share your stories to inspire and to connect with others with that purpose in mind, the key is to choose your listeners wisely, right? You want to be selective in a way because you want to select people, a group of people, an audience, uh, or, a person if you are just doing a one-on-one. Select people who are truly going to benefit from hearing your specific experience and perspective, right? You don't want this story to be lost on anybody. So you know your audience. And then what's really beautiful about knowing your audience and maybe the struggles and the challenges that they face, which may be similar to your own, is that you can actually tailor the details of the story that you share to make it more relevant and more relatable for that group of people or that individual. And so you can choose to highlight certain elements that directly connect to their own life experiences and their own challenges. And finally, you want to invite dialogue, right? So that it's not just a monologue or a soliloquy. It's really, you're opening up the floor for some deeper discussion. So you invite the audience to think about their own experience and reflect on their own thoughts rather than just rushing through your story. And this also makes it more interactive, which, believe it or not, will also make your story more memorable, right? The goal here is to create that back and forth, that two-way exchange that really leaves a lasting impact. So storytelling is a very powerful way to inspire and to connect with others. So the challenge that I'm going to give you is to craft a 2 to 3 minute personal story about a meaningful experience. It can be a work experience, it can be a life experience. And I want you to share this story with a colleague or a friend who is facing a similar challenge. Okay? And as you share this story with them, I want you to pay attention to their reactions, to their responses, and more importantly, to any actions that they take afterward. That's really important because it shows how they were inspired to act. And then get some feedback, right? And it doesn't have to be formal feedback. It can be informal feedback where, you see how well that story resonates with the people that you're sharing it with. And once you get that feedback, I want you to take that, very powerful feedback is, and, refine and strengthen your storytelling skills. So maybe you see that your delivery wasn't quite how it needed to be, or maybe you got too lost in the details, or maybe you didn't give enough detail. The bottom line is that effective storytelling can have a very profound impact on others. So we really want to try to get good at storytelling because it is going to help you bring your A game, not just in a casual setting with friends or family, but in a workplace setting where you might be put on the spot and you have a great set of stories lined up to share about a challenge you've overcome or something you are working on currently. because this is how you are going to make a lasting impact as a leader, as an individual, as a human being. So work on that challenge and feel free to share how you've implemented this storytelling in your own workplace or in your own life. All right. Happy Explearning, everyone.